Hi, my name is Nola. My daughter's been missing for 3 days, and yesterday, I broke into my sister's warehouse. What I found wasn't my daughter. It was something else. Something alive. Something chained. And if you think that's the worst part, you haven't met my family yet. They said I was broken, but they didn't expect me to come looking. Now the question is, what else have they been hiding? I wake up to the soft hum of early morning in my apartment in Austin, Texas. The temperature is mild, windows cracked open, light filtering through trees just outside. I brew coffee, the smell bitter and strong, the way I like it. My phone buzzes with familiar notifications, nothing unusual. Then there's one I don't expect, an Instagram story from Jenna, a friend from college. I open it. There in Charleston, Callista, my older sister, is trying on her wedding dress, lace and satin. She's laughing with bridesmaids. No mention of me, no invitation. This hit me somewhere lower than my chest. It's not just the dress or that smile. It's knowing no one thought to tell me the date. I stare at the screen. I sip my coffee, try to settle the knot in my throat. I've always brushed off small wounds, but this one burns. After breakfast, I'm at my drafting table, working on plans for a project, residential renovation, when my phone vibrates again. It's a notification from a family group chat. The design preview for Callista's wedding invitation is posted. I scroll and my name is on the mock-up design. Relief, maybe. But then I remember. I never received the final printed version, and in this version I see now, my name is nowhere. The wording has shifted. The mock-up had Nola Marbury. The final shows Callista Radcliffe family. No Nola. I pause, pencil hovering over blueprints. I feel a tremor of something I haven't felt in years. Disappointment, thinly disguised. I push my chair back. The sunlight through the window seems too bright, my breathing shallow. That afternoon, I ring Dad, Alden. I say casually, "Hey, did you get my invite for the wedding?" My voice soft, like measuring stones. There's silence. He clears throat. "Maybe it got lost in the mail," he says. "I'll check." It sounds like reassurance, but I taste something hollow. Hours later, I get a text from Marcy, my college roommate. "Hey, saw your name isn't on the guest list post. Are you going to Charleston for Callista's wedding?" My fingers hover over the reply. Because what do I say? That I wasn't invited? That I knew I never would be? I tell herself maybe they just assumed I wouldn't want to go. Maybe they thought I didn't care. Evening comes, dusk warm against the panes. I sit on the balcony, cityscape glowing. Cars, lights, the distant buzz of life moving. I go back through old photos on my phone, holiday dinners, birthdays, family gatherings. There's a photo of me standing between Callista and a cousin 5 years ago. A festive crowd, laughter in the background. I remember that moment distinctly. Dad had called my work ethic amazing. I'd felt proud. But here, I see that same image on Facebook from someone else's post. Callista tagged. Everyone tagged, except me. The version people see now is cropped. The smiling faces, -1. My heart quickens. It isn't a mistake. They decided, quietly, I was not part of the picture. They made me invisible. Vera, my mother, must have told people I couldn't make it. "Nola can't make it," she must have said, even though she never asked if I wanted to be there. The thought stings like salt. Darkness settles in my living room. I pull up Instagram again, scroll through old stories. I see the progression. Mock-ups, rehearsals, florists choosing flowers, bridesmaids planning trips. I delete the app immediately. And the phone feels heavy in my lap. I turn off the light in the living room, but the glow from the street lamps filters in. I lean my back against the wall. I'm not crying, just hollow, quiet. The words spin in my head. Not even invited to your sister's wedding. The betrayal isn't loud. It's in the absence, in the things unsaid. I whisper to myself in that darkness. So this is who I am to them, part of the family when it's convenient. But tonight, I decide. I will not let this go unnoticed. What other parts of my life have been rewritten without me knowing? I wake up to a sky already tinged with gold through the blinds. The air in Austin is warmer, humid, like every time spring edges out of winter. I move slowly, still raw from last night. My phone lies on the nightstand. I try not to reach for it, but the pull is there. By mid-morning, I'm at Small Brew Cafe, a local spot where the floorboards creak and people speak with measured kindness. I sit in a corner booth with a latte, taste too bitter, but I drink anyway. I glance up as a group of older women at a nearby table lift their phones, watching someone's live stream. The audio carries lightly. They all look so happy. Except the younger one didn't show, huh? I freeze, spoon halfway to my lips. The words, "younger one didn't show," they land like stones in still water. I force a polite smile at my latte. I don't say anything. I pretend I'm reading something important, but they're talking about me. Call it presumption, or guilt, or habit. After I leave the cafe, I drive home thinking on that phrase. On the way, a radio station plays a song we used to sing along when Callista and I rode in her old sedan, windows down, volume up. Nostalgia twitches, then recoils. I avoid the freeway, take back roads past pecan orchards and old barns. Traffic's light. I pull into my driveway, park, and sit for a moment with the engine off. I swallow hard. That evening, I find myself alone, lights dim, in my living room. I scroll through my phone until I locate the archived live stream of Callista's wedding. I turn off the lamps. I watch, alone, then rewind. There she is, Vera, leaning into friends, champagne in hand, her laugh lilting. A guest off-camera laughs too. I can't catch the face, but I hear Vera say it clearly. Well, thank goodness she wasn't there. She'd just ruin it, you know. My breath stalls. I pause the video. My throat itches. I play it again. Then comes the voice. You mean Nola? Vera doesn't hesitate. She smiles, like she's been caught smiling on purpose. Of course. Always been dramatic, that one. My chest tightens. Not anger yet. Something sharper. Disappointment. Betrayal. I sit in darkness after the video ends. Phone in lap, heart hammering. I think of my mother's hands, so gentle once, pressing holiday cake into my palm, telling me I'm so thoughtful, so kind. I remember helping decorate the Christmas tree, wrapping gifts for others, staying up late to hang lights, always the one behind the scenes, not center stage, always cheerful, always invisible. I close the laptop. I don't call her. I don't call Callista. I don't send a message that would just get caught somewhere and dissected by someone who already decided I didn't belong. My phone buzzes. A text from my old roommate, Alex. Hey, saw that wedding video. Are you okay? I glance at it. I'll be fine, I type. Later, I open my computer, pull up a folder. I name it Evidence, Family History. Inside, screen grabs of the mock-up invitation I never got, photos from my phone showing my presence at past family events, voice message from Vera hemming and hawing when I asked about coming to Charleston. I create subfolders, wedding chats, old photos, voice memos. I move slowly, deliberately. It's late. The clock reads 11:45. Outside, cicadas hum. Sleep won't come right away. I lie in bed, ceiling fans spinning overhead. I think about how long I've accepted being the silent one. How many times I've dismissed noticing when I was left out, or worse, when I was the punchline. Tonight, I refuse to pretend anymore. Tomorrow, I tell myself, I'll greet someone I know from the wedding live stream differently. Maybe I'll speak up. Maybe I'll ask something sharp. It won't erase anything, but it will be real. They wanted me quiet, but I had one thing they could never erase. That evening, I sat on the couch, lamps turned low, curtains drawn tight. The air in my apartment was still, heavy, as though it carried the weight of everything I hadn't yet said. The blue glow from my phone lit my face, too harsh against skin already worn thin from holding so much. I had just shut the laptop, pushed it aside, and breathed in the stale quiet of the room. Yet silence wasn't comfort. It was pressure. Charleston is hundreds of miles away, yet tonight it felt close, as though the city itself had crept into my room. Ghosts of family dinners, porch conversations, half smiles and whispers hovered at the edge of my memory. Morning came slow, reluctant. Pale light slid through the blinds, casting faint stripes across the floor. I sat with a mug in my hands, scrolling through Facebook, half hoping for distraction. And then I saw it. A throwback photo. 5 years old. A family gathering. I remembered that day clearly. The sunlight spilled warm onto the porch floor, dust floating in golden air. I had held a plate of potato salad, balancing it carefully as Aunt June laughed behind me. There had been chatter, clinking glasses, summer ease. That memory was still vivid in me. But the photo on my screen was different. Cropped, re-uploaded. My body gone. My name erased. What once read with Nola Marbury was replaced with gathering with family. The ache started at my throat and spread outward. A bubble of disbelief rose, then popped, leaving behind raw sting. My chest tightened. It wasn't just forgetting, it was editing. Deliberate erasure. That afternoon I stood at the sink washing dishes. Plates clattered against porcelain as I scrubbed harder than I needed to. The window above the sink framed a pale autumn sky, the cool air slipping in with the smell of soap. Behind me, the table filled with voices. Vera sat there with Callista and Dad. Their conversation drifted over me in sharp waves. They were laughing about Callista's new house. I heard my mother's voice tilt just enough for me to catch. Callista's got her own place now. What about Nola? Laughter followed. Not playful, not warm, but sharpened, dismissing. The sponge slipped in my hand. Water splashed over my fingers. I pressed harder, jaw locked. But I did not leave. I did not speak. I swallowed that sting, let it burn its way down. By evening, shadows stretched long in my apartment, dimming the walls. I pulled out the laptop and opened a blank document. My fingers hovered, then typed a title. Every time I was left out. I wrote until the words blurred. Little moments. Memories people would dismiss as small, but they cut like glass. The high school art award my relatives labeled too weird. The times my parents showcased Callista's projects at parties, forgetting, or refusing, to mention that I had drawn the original designs. Friends congratulating her on work that was mine. Overheard remarks. Nola's the odd one, the different one. I typed until my fingers ached, until my eyes stung. I reread lines, deleted paragraphs, started again. I didn't want melodrama. I wanted truth, a ledger of the invisible. Outside, crickets hummed. The night pressed its steady chorus against my windows. I stopped typing, opened the wedding video again. I had watched it before, but tonight my eyes searched differently. There I was, barely. Shoes visible in the hallway behind bridesmaids. A quick flash of me handing someone a glass, polite smile caught in the frame. Moments real, but cropped out in the versions shared online. My heart clenched tight, painful in my chest. It wasn't forgetting. It was intentional. My presence cut out of history they controlled. I closed the laptop and stood. The floorboard near the door creaked under my step. In the hallway mirror, I saw myself. Tired eyes, hair pulled back, makeup minimal. I studied the faint lines at the corners of my mouth. For years, I believed that if I just smiled harder, worked longer, helped more, they would finally see me. They never did. Night thickened. I carried my journal out to the balcony. The air smelled faintly of jasmine, the city lights scattered below in shifting constellations. Traffic murmured in the distance. I sat with pen poised over paper and wrote, "They didn't just forget me, they made sure I disappeared." The words stared back, sharp and final. For a moment, my hand hovered above the page. I felt fire rising. Not the kind you shout with, not the kind that burns wild. This fire was steady, quiet, relentless. It told me I couldn't go back to silence. I closed the journal, the pen still warm in my hand. I didn't think about reconciliation. I thought about boundaries, about truth, about how much energy I had wasted trying to soften their stories with my silence. If they wanted to pretend, I no longer had to play along. If they wanted to believe I didn't matter, then it was time I lived as though I knew I did. I leaned back, blanket over my legs, eyes tracing the scatter of lights below. Somewhere in another home, another family switched off a lamp, settling into peace. I whispered into the night, a vow meant for no one but myself. They can lie to the world, but not to the banks, not to the courts. And this time, I knew it wasn't just hope. It was truth sharpening into action. They wanted me quiet, but I had one thing they could never erase. I woke before the first light touched the blinds. The apartment felt colder than usual, though the thermostat read the same as always. Maybe it wasn't the room, it was me. My skin prickled with awareness, every sound sharper than it should have been. I moved to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and brewed tea instead of coffee. Something gentler, something that wouldn't rattle nerves already stretched thin. I carried the mug to the window and sat, watching the sky shift from deep indigo to pale gold. Steam curled upward, fading into the glass. The warmth seeped into my hands, though not deep enough to soften what sat heavy inside me. The conversation with Leora the night before. Her kitchen had smelled like home. Citrus soap, fresh bread cooling on the counter. She'd slid a mug of chamomile toward me, her gesture casual, her eyes hesitant. Then she cleared her throat and said the words that cracked something in me. "Mom told me you moved out because you had a breakdown. I thought, maybe you needed space." Her voice was kind, even worried. But the shape of the story wasn't hers. It was Vera's. My own mother, painting me fragile, weak, broken. I hadn't corrected Leora. I hadn't said, "That never happened." Instead, I had sipped my tea, stared out her window, and let the lie sit between us like a guest no one wanted to name. Now, in the early quiet of my apartment, betrayal pressed in from every side. Leora had always been my ally, my listener, the sister who softened the edges, but even that connection had been manipulated, rewritten. If Vera had told her I broke, then the story was already planted, already rooted, and I had stayed silent. Later that morning, I unlocked the door to my design studio, its hinges groaning in familiar protest. The air smelled faintly of dust and graphite. Blueprints lay across the drafting table, fabric swatches stacked neatly beside. The work was mine, hours of labor, of vision. Yet Callista's project still dominated the headlines on my phone. Photos of her innovative design filled the news feed. My hands froze above the swatches, breath caught in my throat. A memory struck. 5 years ago, at a family dinner, Callista's fork clinked against her plate as she laughed. "You've always been the difficult one, you know. Mom worries about your mental health more than mine." Everyone chuckled lightly, dismissing it as sibling banter. I had laughed too, pushing the jab aside. But now, years later, I understood. It wasn't teasing. It was rehearsal. A warning of how they planned to frame me. By midday, the Texas heat pressed against the windows, heavy and relentless. I drove to the park where Eris lived, my one refuge. Their porch creaked as I stepped onto it. 2 chairs sat waiting, weathered wood arms scratched by time. Eris handed me a glass of iced tea, condensation dripping onto my palm. We sat in silence for a while, listening to birds call in the distance, leaves rustling in the warm wind. Then Eris's voice broke through, low and steady. "You don't need their permission to exist, so why are you still chasing it?" I stared into my hands. Calluses marked my fingers where paintbrushes, pencils, and tape had lived, nails chipped, knuckles stiff. I didn't answer. Eris leaned back, eyes soft. "You've been carrying more than you should. Maybe it's time you stop carrying it for them." Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not grief. Something heavier, sharper, a knot of decision. I nodded, slowly, and we let silence return. The porch swing groaned with the breeze. Words became unnecessary. Back home, afternoon light angled across the floorboards. I pulled a fresh journal from the shelf. Its pages were clean, untouched. I traced the pen along the margin before writing the first line. From this point on, every word is documented. Every name will have a timestamp. It wasn't a vow of vengeance. It was a covenant with truth, not their version, not the narrative they pressed into others, but mine. I wrote the title across the first page in firm strokes. Records of being me. Every memory, every manipulation, every erasure. I would write it down. A ledger they could not edit. As evening cooled the air, I sat on my balcony. The city hummed below, headlights threading through the streets. Windows flickered on in distant buildings. I thought about all the dinners where I swallowed myself down, where I stirred soup and set silverware and smiled through stories, pretending that loving them enough might repair what was broken. But tonight, I knew the truth. Silence doesn't protect. Silence erases. I opened my laptop, found the recording of Callista's wedding streaming live. I watched it frame by frame. There I was, my face caught once in the corner of the camera. A faint smile, unguarded. Proof I had been there, not forgotten. I leaned forward, screenshot it. Then came the whispers on screen, the sidelong looks, the laughter that wasn't kind. Someone mouthed, "She's always dramatic." The camera caught Vera nodding, lips curling. It was small, fleeting, but real. I closed the video, the laptop glow dimming the room around me. My heartbeat was steady now, not frantic, not fury, resolve. Tomorrow, I would send messages, not confrontations, but clarity, to Leora, to Eris, to others who had doubted, who had wondered silently. I would share what I'd found. I would stop excusing erasure as misunderstanding. I would stop telling myself I was too sensitive. Later that night, I lay on the couch, blanket draped across my legs. Somewhere in the building, a light clicked off, another family tucking themselves into peace. I stared at the ceiling's patterns, my thoughts sharp as glass. I whispered, not loud, just enough for the night to hear. They can lie to the world, but not to the banks, not to the courts. And this time, I knew I believed it. They can lie to the world. They can charm neighbors, twist stories, and invent excuses for anyone willing to listen. But they cannot lie to the banks, and they cannot lie to the courts. The next evening, after twilight had already spread its indigo veil across Austin, I sat at my kitchen counter sorting through a stack of mail. The air felt unusually heavy, humid, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The ceiling fan above turned slowly, stirring the thick air without relief. Bills, flyers, a charity solicitation. Then, one envelope caught my eye. Padded, worn at the edges, its seal stamped with the insignia of a real estate trust. My pulse quickened. I set down my coffee mug and studied the package. I hesitated. My thumb brushed along the seam, reluctant to tear it open, as though inside might be something alive, waiting. Finally, I ripped it. Inside was a quarterly report for a property, land I had believed for years no longer tied to me. But there it was, in black type, my name. Co-owner, Nola Marbury. The words shimmered under the lamplight. I blinked, then read them again, but they didn't change. Below the listing, my signature appeared beside the transfer document, but the date was wrong, stamped as if I had signed it years after I actually had. Wrong, manipulated, as though I had willingly erased myself. I picked up my phone with hands that trembled, dialing the trust attorney whose number I kept from old correspondence. He answered with a voice steady, clipped, accustomed to precision. I explained quickly, stumbling at first, then reading line by line from the report. There was a pause as he examined the digital copies I emailed mid-call. Then his voice came back, firm and certain. Signature forged. The blood roared in my ears. Your name, he continued, was never legally removed. Shock expanded beneath my ribs like a storm breaking. When the call ended, I sat in silence, my phone face down on the counter. For a long time, I didn't move. Then, slowly, I began to gather everything I had. The desk lamp cast a pool of golden light across my living room table as I spread out papers, old invoices, scanned emails, contractor acknowledgments, copies of checks. Each page was a small hammer cracking at the wall of lies they'd built around me. The clock ticked past midnight, then into the early hours, but I kept going. Page after page, my name appeared. Proof of ownership, proof of responsibility, proof of existence, proof they had tried to erase. By dawn, my body was heavy, but my mind burned sharp. I showered, dressed in a plain white blouse and dark slacks, brewed myself coffee, and sat at my desk as the pale morning light crept in. My laptop glowed. Fingers hovered above the keys. I drafted an email to Vera and to Dad. Subject line: "Do not attempt another transfer. You are being watched." Inside, I included the property report, the forged transfer document, a side-by-side comparison of signatures. Mine versus the imitation. Clear. Undeniable. At the bottom, I BCC'd 2 law firms I had quietly consulted weeks earlier, their addresses waiting like silent witnesses. My finger hovered over send. For a second, I felt the old hesitation, the urge to soften, to doubt myself, to retreat. But then I pressed it. There was no thrill, no smile, just clarity, like glass shattering clean. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. Callista's voice, smooth, rehearsed, practiced in the art of minimizing. "Nola, you're being so dramatic. You know, Mom and Dad didn't mean to." I didn't listen further. I deleted the message mid-sentence. I didn't want apologies dressed as excuses. I didn't want her voice dripping with condescension, pretending this was a misunderstanding, pretending my presence was an inconvenience. Instead, I kept working. That evening, I created a secure cloud folder titled, "In Case They Try Again." Inside, I built subfolders, contracts, signature copies, property title reports, each file labeled with dates, cross-referenced with names. I locked it all with 2-step verification, the digital fortress of someone who has been burned and will not be burned twice. Then I began drafting a legal declaration. Not final, not filed, just notes. A skeleton of what could become an affidavit for asset division, or the foundation for a restraining order if necessary. Knowing it existed gave me something solid, a structure they could not knock down. When the work was done, I stepped onto my balcony. The air was cooler now, the jasmine from a neighbor's garden drifting upward. The city stretched before me, its lights flickering like restless stars. Cars whispered along distant highways, porch lamps blinked on across the street. The world carried on. I looked at my hands. They were steadier than before. The knot in my chest loosened. I thought about the house built on lies, their house, constructed from omissions, from gossip, from signatures bent into shapes that weren't mine. For years, I had let myself believe those erasures defined me. Not anymore. There comes a moment, silent and sharp, when hope hardens into something else. For so long, I had waited for someone to notice, for someone else to acknowledge. But hope had cost me too much. I no longer wanted hope. I wanted boundaries. I wanted truth. I wanted acknowledgement that could not be stolen. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start with Lyora. I would send her the evidence, clean and unarguable. I would share it with others who had whispered doubts for years, who had questioned in silence but never spoken aloud. I would not ask forgiveness. I would ask acknowledgement. That night, I lay in bed with the curtains cracked just enough for moonlight to touch my pillow. Stars glittered faintly, half hidden behind city glow. I whispered a vow to the dark. My presence will be undeniable. They thought I'd back down quietly. They forgot who built this house. The sun had only just begun to burn off the mist when I pulled into the community center parking lot. Sunday mornings, there had become ritual for me. I carried my folded volunteer apron in one hand, a small thermos of tea in the other. Usually, I settled into the routine easily, stacking plates, serving food, checking in newcomers. The work grounded me. It was honest. No one asked about profit margins or patents. Just, can you pour juice? Can you carry this tray? Inside, the familiar smell wrapped around me. Brewed coffee, syrup-soaked pancakes, the sharp edge of bleach from a just-mopped floor. Folding tables had already been set out, covered with cheap white cloths. Stacks of paper cups gleamed in rows. Volunteers bustled, greeting one another, their voices low and warm like a choir humming before the song begins. For a few minutes, I let myself sink into that rhythm. But then something shifted. I felt eyes I didn't recognize linger on me, whispers like drafts curling through the room. Lips moved quickly, then stopped when mine turned their way. By mid-brunch, I was handing out plates, my apron already spotted with juice stains, when a woman leaned close. I didn't know her well, maybe had seen her once or twice around the center. Her tone was careful, almost sympathetic, but her words were sharp. "I heard you've been having a rough mental spell," she said softly. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Vera mentioned something." I froze for half a second, heat crawling up my neck. My mother's name, her voice carried into this room, even without her being present. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were strategic. I heard the calculation in them, how sympathy was just another blade. Something in her tone wasn't asking if I was okay. It was asking permission to gossip. I forced a smile, nodded once. "Thank you," I said, my voice flat. Then I moved on. I stacked cups. I refilled pitchers. Behind me, laughter rose from a table. Someone's voice cut across the room. "Always dramatic, right?" My ears caught it like a hook, but I didn't turn to see if it was meant for me. Maybe it was. Maybe it didn't matter. Instead, I buried myself in the work. Hands wet, back bent, clearing dishes, wiping surfaces until my muscles burned. The physical rhythm steadied me. With each plate stacked, I asked myself, how many times have they tried to rewrite me as fragile, unstable, unworthy, so no one would have to take me seriously? By the time I returned home that afternoon, my apron folded tight in my bag, my body felt heavy, but my mind sharper. I closed the door behind me and let the silence settle. I opened my laptop, fingers steady on the keyboard. In my private notes folder were months of therapy records, clean, no diagnoses. Just session summaries where I described stress, exhaustion, frustration, my voice recorded in clinical shorthand. None of it matched the story Vera spread. Then I opened the file of texts. Her words glared back at me, sharp in their casual cruelty. "You're too sensitive. You make things up. Don't act like you're depressed." I took screenshots of every single one. Each click of the keys was deliberate. I gathered them into a new folder I titled, Psych Manipulation Evidence, Do Not Deny. Cold preparation. No tears, no trembling, just facts being stacked like bricks. As evening stretched long shadows across my apartment walls, my phone buzzed. A client I had worked with last year had messaged. Their words chilled me. "Your mom called asking if I trust your judgment. Said people worry about your stability." Attached was a voicemail forwarded from Vera. Her voice filled the room. Calm, insidious. "You may want to keep your contracts clean." Family history. My name twisted into doubt. My reputation questioned in a stranger's ear. I saved the voicemail. It became Exhibit A. I sat back in my chair, air stuck shallow in my chest. For a moment, I felt small, like a child again, dwarfed by their shadows. But then something else surged up, hotter, steadier, indignation. That night, I opened my laptop to Zoom. My lawyer appeared on the screen, professional and calm, framed by the bookshelves of their study. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I said simply, "Let's prepare the restraining order, if needed. I will not be slandered out of my career." They nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. I uploaded every piece of evidence, the texts, the voicemail, property documents, signature comparisons. Each file carefully named, each time-stamped. My history, organized and undeniable. Later, I stepped out onto my balcony. The city hummed below me, headlights sliding through the dark. The air was cool, the stars scattered in a sky that felt impossibly wide. I leaned against the railing, let the night press into me, and for the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't fear. It was power, not loud, not boastful, but quiet and rock-steady. They wanted to break me with whispers and shadows. They thought if they painted me unstable, no one would listen. But I had lit up every dark corner with evidence. Proof. I do not need their forgiveness. I need acknowledgement. I need my contracts untainted. I need my name respected. I rested my head in my hands, breathing deep. This would matter, not because they deserved justice, but because I deserved to stand unbroken. They built their house on borrowed names. They borrowed time, borrowed credit, borrowed ideas that were never theirs to claim. For years, they pretended no one would notice, that theft dressed in polish could pass as talent. But now, the bank was calling everything due. I arrived at the expo hall just before the doors opened, portfolio case in one hand, water bottle in the other. The morning air still smelled faintly of dew and coffee from the vendors outside. Inside, volunteers hurried across polished floors, setting up booths and banners, arranging models of sustainable housing that glittered under fluorescent light. I stood near the entrance, watching the crowd begin to gather. Developers, investors, eager clients, architects with rolled blueprints tucked beneath their arms. My breath was steady, but beneath it hummed a low, determined thrum. Earlier that morning, before leaving my apartment, I had sent an email to the expo organizers. The subject line was deliberate: intellectual property theft, with supporting evidence. Attached were the blueprints from my design studio, each document dated and signed, photos of sketches, project proposals addressed directly to Vera. Contracts and email correspondences proving both the originality of my work and the trail of theft that followed. When I pressed send, my heart pounded in my throat. But I did it. This time, I no longer expected silence. When the crowd reached the green roof model house booth, I slipped into the flow of bodies. There she was, Callista, standing tall behind a podium, voice smooth, polished, practiced. She gestured toward the model house behind her, the centerpiece of her presentation, the branding, the layout, the eco-glass roof catching the light, the garden pathway curving toward the facade. Every detail screamed familiarity because it was mine, not just inspired, not just similar, identical. She spoke with conviction, her words echoing in the hall. Sustainability, sun orientation, energy efficiency, durability. The audience clapped, eating it up. My mouth went dry. My palms pressed against the smooth leather of my portfolio case as if it were the only anchor in the room. I kept walking, each step measured, each breath a battle against the knot in my chest. When her presentation ended, hands shot up with questions, but I raised mine higher. "Excuse me, Callista," I said, voice carrying louder than I expected. The crowd quieted. Callista froze mid-gesture. Dozens of eyes shifted toward me. I didn't blink. "I believe I submitted this design last May. My name is on the pitch materials. Can you explain how it became yours?" The silence that followed was a living thing. The applause evaporated. Somewhere behind me, someone gasped. Color rose in Callista's cheeks. She stammered, "Designs evolve. Inspiration. Everyone borrows ideas." But I was already moving. From my case, I pulled the printouts, drawings, emails stamped with my name, early versions of the logos, material samples. I placed them on the concession table with calm precision, evidence. Investors leaned forward. A sponsor walked over, brow furrowed, squinting at the documents. "Looks identical," they murmured, not quietly enough. Callista opened her mouth, but nothing came. My blood surged, not with hatred, not even anger, but with something cleaner. Clarity. Hours later, I sat in the expo waiting area on a bench by the glass wall. My hands shook slightly as I opened the shared cloud archive on my phone. There they were, timestamps on every project file I had ever created, proof of submission dates, photographs of me presenting the design at workshops. Each piece another nail securing truth into place. I created a new folder, original concepts, ownership confirmed. Then I attached it to a single email. Recipients: every partner associated with Callista's project, sponsors, contractors, builders. Subject: verifiable evidence of authorship. No commentary, no explanations, just the facts. I pressed send. By evening, the expo officials contacted me directly. The project's webpage updated. Callista's name was stripped from the design credits. A notice appeared. Under review for intellectual property concerns. Social media swarmed. Some posts mocked her. Looks like someone who claims originality just got exposed. Others rallied. This is what happens when you steal people's work. A few messages cut sharper, crueler, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. At home that night, I unlocked my phone and saw a message from Mom. "We need to talk. Everyone's upset." I didn't reply. Instead, I drafted my own email. Subject: I know what you've done. I wrote, I have records of all of it. I am no longer silent. I am no longer yours. I BCC'd the family lawyer. Then I pressed send. My hands were calm. Later, lying in bed with the ceiling fan spinning above me, I stared into the dark. My chest no longer felt fragile. Instead, there was sharpness, awareness, a kind of strength that came not from winning, but from finally refusing to lose myself. I thought about all the years I had let myself be invisible, all the times I chose silence so others could be comfortable. No more. Tonight, I laid a final line between me and my history. The future didn't promise restoration, it promised possibility, and that was enough. Tomorrow, I would build from here, not on borrowed names, not in someone else's shadow, but on my own foundation, authentic, undeniable, mine. I deserve to be seen, fully, without apology. They built their house on borrowed names, not bricks, not beams, not foundations of love, but forged signatures and half-truths dressed up as clever accounting. For years, that house stood like a monument to their reinvention, tall and proud, while I lived beneath its shadow. Now, the bank was calling everything due. I was stirring my coffee that morning, half distracted, when my phone buzzed, a message from a friend still living in the neighborhood. "Something's happening at your parents' place. You might want to check it out." I froze, mug halfway to my lips. For a long moment, I didn't move. My chest tightened, but it wasn't fear. It was something heavier, quieter, a weight that felt like inevitability. Justice. Within 10 minutes, I was parked 2 houses down from the Marbury home, the place where I had spent half my life being rewritten, reshaped, erased. 2 black SUVs with federal plates filled the driveway. Their presence was an indictment in itself. 2 IRS auditors stood at the front door, one clutching a leather binder, the other scanning the street like he'd been through this ritual countless times. The calm of professionals who already knew how the story ended. Through the bay window, I saw her, Vera, my mother. Her posture was stiff, her mouth slightly parted, as though words had failed her for once. She wore her favorite cream blouse, the one she thought made her look untouchable, but her hands betrayed her, wringing, twisting the hem like a woman caught without armor. My father, Alden, shuffled beside her in his robe, his dignity unraveling thread by thread. His voice carried faintly even through the glass, stumbling excuses, reaching for exits that no longer existed. The scene was sterile, surgical. Truth arriving not with fanfare, but with paperwork and signatures. What surprised me most was the absence of feeling. No rush of triumph, no tremor of guilt, just stillness, a knowing that this was always where their lies would lead. I'd sent the tips, not just one, but several, over months. The misused inheritance accounts, the double reporting of income under Callista's company name, the endless quiet manipulations they assumed no one would notice. But numbers never forget. Neither do signatures. That afternoon, the ripples began. From Callista, silence, not a word, not a line. From their accountant, due to recent investigations, our firm will be suspending service to the Marbury estate pending resolution. From a local reporter, we'd like a comment from you, given your previous filings. Anonymous, if you prefer. I didn't respond. Not then. I wanted the dust to settle first. 2 weeks later came the annual spring brunch, the event they held onto like a crown jewel of legitimacy. Same venue as always, the garden club with its manicured hedges, its over-sugared lemonade and forced laughter. But this time, the air was different, brittle, like glass just before it shatters. Eyes followed me as I walked in. Slate gray pantsuit, no jewelry but a plain watch, my hair pulled back. No smile. Callista found me halfway through the event. Mimosa flute clutched like a lifeline. She looked pale, her posture uncertain. Nola, she said, voice cracking under the weight of everything unsaid. I just want to say I'm sorry for everything. I know it's late. Her eyes glistened. Maybe genuine, maybe rehearsed. I didn't bother measuring which. I looked at her for 3 long seconds, enough to let her see I heard her. Then I said, calm and steady, "You can apologize to my lawyer." Her face fell, lips trembling around words she couldn't shape. I turned, nodded to no one in particular, and walked away. My boots struck the tiled floor with sharp finality. Each step was a punctuation mark. Behind me, silence. No pleas, no interruptions, just the kind of quiet that swallows entire rooms. By mid-May, the settlement agreement arrived in a thick envelope, every page precise and deliberate. Callista would pay restitution for the intellectual property theft, not enough to ruin her, but enough to sting, to remind her. Vera and Alden had signed a non-contact clause, ironclad and undeniable. No more phone calls, no more letters, no more sudden reappearances meant to twist my spine into old shapes. I read every line twice, then I signed it. No champagne followed, no triumphant exclamations, just a slow exhale, long overdue. One breath to release the years behind me, one to make room for the space ahead. Weeks passed. The weight that had anchored me so long began to dissolve, replaced by something softer. Air. On a quiet Sunday in June, I drove past the house one final time. The yard was unkempt, grass patchy, hedges drooping without her manicured touch. A for sale sign leaned in the front lawn, its edges catching the wind. The porch sagged where once we'd sat on swing nights. Paint peeled along the railing where my small hands once clutched after scraped knees. It was a skeleton of the monument they had built. I parked at the curb and stepped out, stopping at the edge of the walkway, far enough not to trespass, close enough to see clearly. I didn't take a photo, didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the silence fold around me. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear or erasure. It was the silence of healing, of closure. When I finally turned and walked away, I wasn't empty. I wasn't triumphant either. I was whole. I hadn't won everything. I hadn't wanted everything. But I had taken back something they could never forge, never counterfeit, never repossess. Myself. And that was more valuable than any house, any name, any legacy they tried to write me out of. I walked away with scars. But at least I was finally walking away. For the first time in years, silence wasn't terrifying. It wasn't that suffocating hush I grew up in, the kind that pressed down on my chest until I thought my lungs would collapse. No, this silence was different. It was full. It carried presence instead of emptiness. My new home sat on a tree-lined street in Houston. The neighborhood wasn't fancy. No grand gates or luxury cars lined up in perfect driveways. Instead, it was steady, modest, and unpretentious. The kind of place where kids left their bikes tipped over in the grass and neighbors waved, even if they didn't know your name. My townhome had no ghosts in the walls, no memories waiting to ambush me around the corner. Just the creak of old wooden floors when I walked too quickly, and the soft chime of my neighbor's wind bells drifting in through the window. There were still boxes stacked in a corner by the front door, untouched since move-in day. I'd been living here for weeks, but hadn't had the courage to open some of them. Today, though, something shifted in me. I pulled one small box from the stack, marked only with a single word in black marker: keep. Inside were 3 picture frames wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. The first frame held a photo of Leora and me during a hiking trip in Arizona. The sunlight had burned our skin red, our lips were chapped, but our eyes were lit with the kind of laughter that came from belonging, if only for a moment. The second frame was softer, Eris asleep on the couch, our old dog Max nestled against her side. Both of them looked so peaceful, so unguarded, that for a second I swore I could still hear the faint rhythm of their breathing. And the third frame? The one I hadn't touched in years. In it, a little girl, me, no older than 7, sat cross-legged under a tree with a coloring book balanced on her knees. My head was bent low, hair falling forward, hiding most of my face. There was no one else in the frame, just me, alone, lost in silent concentration. That silence felt almost louder now that I was looking back. I placed all 3 photos carefully on the mantel above the fireplace. My hands didn't tremble. No tears blurred my vision, just acknowledgement. I was done pretending the past hadn't happened. But I was equally done letting it dictate every choice I made. That evening, while rummaging through the study, I found something unexpected tucked between an old sketchbook and a pile of half-finished client forms. A letter, addressed to Vera, unsent, unopened, forgotten. The handwriting was mine, but it looked foreign, smaller than usual, tighter, controlled, like I was trying to strangle the feelings out of myself. You could have chosen me. You didn't, and I finally accept that. The line had been underlined twice. I read it once, then carried it to the fireplace. I didn't feed it to the flames out of vengeance or spite. I watched it burn slowly, word by word, ink dissolving into smoke, because it no longer belonged to me. Letting go wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just necessary. The next morning, I sat down at my laptop and found an unread message waiting in my inbox. From Callista. Subject: I'm sorry. Her email was long, scattered, almost frantic. Half confession, half plea. I know I hurt you. I didn't mean to be cruel. I was just trying to survive, too. Please believe me, you're my sister. That has to mean something. Once, I would have clung to those words, dissected them, searched desperately for sincerity in between the cracks of her guilt. This time, I read it only once. Then I replied with a single clean sentence. I hope you figure out who you are, without needing to erase me to do it. I didn't wait for a response. I wasn't sure she'd ever read mine, but the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a modest group gathered at a community center workshop. The flyer outside had advertised it simply: Designing Boundaries, Architecture for the Self. It wasn't glamorous. No spotlight. No stage broadcast to millions. But the room was full. Young women clutching notebooks, a few older women with faces lined by time and endurance, and a mother with her teenage daughter who reminded me achingly of myself at that age, watchful, quiet, and cautious. I spoke about design, about how the hardest blueprints to draw aren't always for buildings or homes, but for boundaries. Emotional architecture, protecting what should have been safe all along. At the end, a woman in the back lifted her hand. Her voice trembled as she asked, Do you still talk to your family? The room seemed to hold its breath. I smiled, not out of joy, but understanding. Some bonds are meant to be broken, I said softly. That doesn't make us broken. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hollow. It was full of people realizing they weren't alone. That evening, I left the center just as the sun was sinking low, painting the horizon in muted gold and fire. The air was cooler than I expected for that time of year, brushing against my face like a reminder change could be gentle too. As I walked, my mind drifted back, unbidden, to my sister's wedding, the one I hadn't been invited to. For years, I had replayed that memory like a wound that wouldn't close, bleeding over everything else. Not anymore. On my sister's wedding day, they didn't have me there. But the truth was, I was never meant to be background noise at someone else's celebration. I am my own ceremony, my own vow, my own witness. This journey isn't about waiting for an invitation to someone else's table. It's about building my own table and choosing carefully who gets a seat. And as I walked home beneath the quiet Houston sky, I realized something I had never truly believed before. I wasn't just walking away. I was walking toward. Sometimes, the loudest betrayals don't come from enemies, but from the silence of those who were supposed to love us. Nola's story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice when others tried to erase it. Have you ever had to walk away from family to find peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw stories that cut deep and speak truth.